All right, we're ready to go. I'm going to pull out the presentation. There we go.
All right, hi everybody. This is our group. We're going to introduce ourselves one at a time, but this is what we chose to do is implementing Georgia's new ELA standards through effective professional learning. I'm Michell Davis.
I am Niajah Thomas.
Hello, I am Princess Watts.
Good evening, I'm Jermaine Clemons.
And I'm Julia Coker, and I'm actually going to be implementing the icebreaker activity. So if we move into the next slide. So the activity that I chose, if I were going to be conducting the PD session, it's called Stand Up If. And this is going to get everyone engaged and moving. And I think everybody can agree that the icebreaker in any PD session is probably every teacher's least favorite aspect of a PD session and can oftentimes be the most awkward. However, with this icebreaker, teachers don't have to say anything. They don't have to speak in front of the whole group. However, it gives them an opportunity to see that they've all experienced change at some point, and that shared experience gives them the ability to build connection. So again, it's called Stand Up If, and I would call out different prompts. For example, stand up if you've taught under 3 or more different sets of standards. Stand up if you've ever had to rework lessons because of changes in assessments, the Georgia DOE tasks, or because the standard doesn't explicitly say what students need. The next one would be stand up if you tried a new teaching strategy that didn't work, but it still taught you something. Stand up if you've helped a colleague adjust to a new curriculum or standard. So after a couple of rounds, I would point out that almost everybody in the professional development had probably stood up at some point, unless they were maybe a new teacher. This shows that resistance and adjustment are normal parts of teaching, and that makes a natural transition in our focus today, which is addressing resistance and finding supports for implementing Georgia's new ELA standards. To the next slide. So the reflection and wrap up, I would kind of reiterate the fact that we've all experienced change in education. Every teacher has already proven that they're able to adapt to change. And then resistance is natural, but so is adapting. And the question isn't whether we resist, but how can we support one another through the process? And then shared experiences build that teacher support. And that's pretty much what this session is about.
All right, so our first question here is, what are the key components of an effective professional learning plan? We put down to analyze student and teacher needs using data. You also want to write SMART goals that are connected to the student outcomes. We want to focus on the educated KASABs, which is knowledge, attitude, skills, aspirations, and behaviors. We also want to choose research-based strategies and provide resources to support the teachers. We want to create a structured timeline that includes clear roles, clear and defined roles, responsibilities, as well as benchmarks. And then lastly, we want to have an ongoing evaluation. And that's to check progress and adjust for long-term impact.
Okay, and our next question is, how does the guide emphasize alignment with the student goals and the educator needs as well? So the first thing is to begin with the student achievement goals to determine what the teacher needs to learn or to adjust in order to meet the student. The teacher professional learning should be data-driven always, problem-based strategies, and be systematically designed. So you want to make sure you look at the data of the student first in order to know what direction you're going in, and then being sure that you align your teacher goals to the student's goals to to make sure that you're ensuring professional development directly to support the whole classroom and that student individually.
All right, so thank you. Our next one is, what role does evaluation play in sustaining professional learning, or why is evaluation important with our professional learning? So a couple key components as to why evaluation is important is it helps keep the professional development alive. It helps move your mindset beyond the one-time event, and it helps you kind of figure out ways that you can improve yourself with your teaching and your curriculum and your content and how you're delivering that to your students. It also helps you to track your progress, monitor your growth as a teacher, and help you figure out how you're going to create success for yourself, for your future self, and for your students as you guys navigate throughout the school year. The last kind of important piece is it promotes reflection. So providing evidence of effectiveness, and it ensures accountability. So the best thing you can do for yourself and for your students is to reflect on what worked, what didn't work, and what your next steps would be. If you don't do that, then there's not going to be any forward progress with how you're moving throughout your lessons.
All right, and then we move into the root causes, the 3 root causes of resistance and how they show up in context. We have wariness, which is the teachers. Obviously, you feel unsure. Anytime there's something new that's implemented as teachers, we do feel unsure, or we're a little sometimes hesitant when we feel like it lacks clarity, as well as if you don't have the necessary support in place. Willfulness, teachers, push back to create autonomy or establish methods. We're creatures of habit as teachers, so sometimes, having to get outside of our norm is a bit uncomfortable. But like I tell my students all the time, sometimes we have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Lastly is weariness, where you get fatigue and overload, basically teacher burnout. You get tired of all the constant changes over and over and over. But at the end of the day, it's all about the student and providing the best support and strategies for the student.
All right. How do the why wholeness strategies address teacher resistance? So as Jermaine just mentioned, there are 3 root causes of resistance. So this particular strategy is a 3-part strategy that provides pathways to shift teacher resistance into engagement, which is our overall goal. So the first part of the pathway is the we. The we builds trust. It involves teamwork and shared responsibility, so teachers don't feel isolated. They don't feel like they're doing the work all alone. The next part is the why. It provides a clear purpose and shows how initiatives directly connect to student success. And then the last part of the framework is the wholeness. It includes respecting teachers' well-being, their capacity, and just trying to provide a balance to preventing burnout.
All right, and then the last slide addressing the question from the 2 articles, how can coaching and culture building support engagement and professional learning? Coaching offers personalized support, guiding teachers and applying new strategies with confidence. This kind of means that coaching is having somebody in your corner. You're not being evaluated when you're being coached. It is support. And then someone to walk with you as you try out new ideas in your classroom. I tend to think about it like this: when you have someone guiding you, you're more willing to take a risk because you don't feel like you're doing it alone. And then culture building builds trust, celebrates growth, and fosters collaboration. Culture is what makes professional learning stick. If teachers trust each other, they're more likely to try new things, even if they're not sure it's going to go perfectly. And then culture building is also about celebrating little wins, like if a new strategy actually clicks with a tough group of students, and that builds up momentum with teachers. And then finally, together, they create a safe environment where professional learning feels relevant, supported, and sustainable. So coaching without culture can sometimes feel pushy. And however, culture without coaching is nice, but it's often aimless. We have to have both. And when you put them together, teachers feel like the professional development is relevant, supportive, and sustainable. So.
Okay, so now moving into the overall purpose of why we're talking about professional learning. So professional learning is very essential for the successful implementation of the new ELA standards that we all have. It's also purposeful to connect the teacher growth with the improved student achievement from these new standards. And to also, as we've all been stating, to address the resistance to change and reframe it. It is very difficult for us as educators to get into this change and this framework of it, but it is also an opportunity for growth as well. And moving forward with this change, our target audience are ELA teachers across the grades from K through 2. District-wide staff can be included. I think they should be included because they are the ones who want us to implement this new strategy. So if they understand it and they are helping us and supporting us, that'll make us feel like, you know, we're able to do this, and then it's going to trickle down into our students. Why they are our target audience? Because they are directly responsible for the classroom implementation. Like teachers are the roots of this, and for how the outcomes turn out with our students. This matters because teachers need the clear support, the strategies to incorporate these, and the culture and climate in order to grow with these new standards.
So now we're going to discuss why is this professional development needed. It seems like, and it feels like for us teachers and educators, that every few years our standards are constantly changing. Much less things are changing on a day-to-day basis, but the standards feel like they're changing often. So with new standards come new demands out of the teachers. How are we supposed to implement it? What are we supposed to say? How are we supposed to get the students to comprehend the content that we're delivering to them? Teachers must adjust their instruction to align with the updated ELA expectations. Professional learning is key in being able to implement these new standards. So we need to be able to analyze the students' needs. We need to figure out where they're at, what they need, and how are we going to get them there. We need to be able to write SMART goals, and that's going to help kind of bridge that gap and kind of give them a timeline and overall idea of where they're going to be and when they're going to be at these different goals throughout the year. We're also going to focus on educator KSABs, which is knowledge, attitude, skills, aspirations, and behaviors, as well as choosing research-based strategies. We'll also align roles and give them timelines to when these roles and timelines are supposed to be implemented and expected. And we'll also use evaluation to measure our impact. You have to be able to evaluate where you're at, where you want to go, and what the overall outcome is to be able to figure out how much growth you've had and where you need to go. You'll also align plans with the students' goals, and then you'll identify what the educators must learn in order to meet those specific goals. Evaluation is a key to accountability. Again, it helps keep your professional development alive and prevents just saying, okay, I did that. Okay, I did that. So it helps prevent checkbox culture. And ensures students' outcomes improve, and it ensures that teachers are measuring student growth, not just teachers being compliant and teaching what they have to teach. Because the overall goal is to ensure that students are growing and comprehending. The next part is resistance and engagement. So the root causes of resistance is 3 kind of like subcategories. These are weariness, willfulness, and weariness. So in weariness, the teachers are kind of unsure how they can manage these new expectations. They kind of think, oh, well, I already have so much on my plate, or I don't really know about this. How am I supposed to implement this when I don't know anything about this? Willfulness discusses like the desire for autonomy, not, it doesn't resemble teachers' lack of care. Weariness is kind of falls into teacher burnout in a way. Too many initiatives can lead to exhaustion, mental exhaustion, burnout, all the normal things that we see within teachers. So, how are we going to prevent this resistance and get teachers on board with learning these new standards? So, some of the strategies to address resistance is the we why wholeness. So, we work with the teachers, not over them. Why? We show the purpose behind standards and strategies. Wholeness, we recognize the limits, honor rest, and pace the changes. So the wholeness is kind of like the most important to me, because the recognizing limits, like everybody has their limit on what they feel like they can personally do and achieve. Honoring rest, absolutely. Everybody needs time to kind of reset, understand, comprehend, and then pacing the changes. You can't just pile it on one plate. You have to kind of implement a little bit at a time. So coaching and culture building will also assist with the teacher resistance. So coaching, as Niajah mentioned previously, is where they're working with you. It's not, you're not being looked down on, you're not being judged, you're being held, and you're being supported. Culture is trust, small wins, safety to grow. I know Julia talked about that as well. And together these things lower resistance and boost engagement within their school systems. So our next part is the KSAB learning objectives. So these are how it can be broken down, and kind of where how these things can be implemented for student achievement and for teachers. So the KSAB objectives that I chose was knowledge, skills, and behaviors. So with knowledge, the educators are going to be able to understand all four of the domains within Georgia's new ALA standards. Those domains are the foundations, language, texts, and practices. And that knowledge is important for the student achievement because it's going to allow the students to receive differentiated instruction while also aiding in their ability to comprehend the content that's being delivered. For teacher practice, it's going to allow the educators to effectively plan and incorporate progressions throughout the unit or lessons. And it's also going to aid with the teachers in being able to align the curriculum and the content with different types of assessments. Again, differentiation is so important as educators and being able to show our students growth. For skills, educators are going to be able to design and implement instruction content and a variety of assessments that follow the learning progressions within the Georgia's ELA K through 12 standards. So for the student achievement, students who are struggling will be able to receive differentiated support that resonates with their individual learning needs. Early finishers or students who finish quickly will be challenged to broaden their understanding, and thus raising overall proficiency within that content area. Educators will be able to make data decisions, adjust the pacing of the content, group students by their abilities, and scaffold content to ensure that students are getting their needs met. And then with behaviors, educators will enact daily practices or daily routines that center around discourse or discussions, talking related to the text, to the author's craft, and to the language conventions. So what this means is that for student achievement, students are going to be able to become better readers and writers, and they're going to be able to understand and comprehend the text easier. Obviously, this is going to come like with time. It's not going to be right off the bat, but with time and with practice and consistency, these things will start falling into place. Students are also going to be able to eventually use more complex vocabulary when speaking and writing, and it also aids in student independence. Finally, for teacher practice, as with the behaviors, teachers are going to be able to embed routines within their lesson plans, creating a daily routine that's consistent, and it also fosters a sense of classroom culture based on inquiry and understanding.
All right, so how do we address teacher resistance? Well, we can utilize the We, Why, Wholeness framework. Again, this is a three-part framework that basically provides strategies for shifting teacher resistance to overall being engaged and getting that true buy-in. So as Michelle mentioned, the three root causes are wariness, willfulness, and weariness when it comes to resistance. With this particular framework, the we part simply builds community. The why clarifies the purpose for the teachers. And then the wholeness just acknowledges humanity. So I'm just going to kind of go through each of the root causes and how the framework can be applied. So any area of wariness, when we talk about the we, that's building relationships. Teachers share our shared decision making. So they're a part of the decision making process. Normalizing uncertainty. It's okay not to have all the answers. As teachers, we want to have all the answers, but it's okay not to know everything. With the why component, explaining how change links to students, student needs and teacher outcomes. It's important for teachers to understand how the new learning, in this case, the new ELA standards, connect to their work. And then the wholeness, acknowledging emotions and expertise. All at the end of the day, all individuals want to feel heard and validated. And the second root cause of resistance, willfulness, which again is just the pushback or teachers having strong feelings or clinging to how things were done in the past. When we think about building community in the we component, creating a safe space is key. Teachers need the opportunity to be able to voice their opinions freely, and they need to be able to participate in respectful dialogue. Under why, again, clarifying the purpose, evidence and student data should drive the why. That is the end all be all. Everything should be rooted in student data. And then wholeness, honors professionalism. Change should be framed as building on teachers' pre-existing knowledge and their strengths. So yes, you've been doing these things really well. Here's how we can build upon that to reach our new goal. And then the third area of resistance, weariness. And that simply speaks to burnout and teacher overload and just being exhausted. When we think about the we category, that's sharing the workload. This is accomplished by having true collaborative teams and peers providing support, so no one feels like they're doing all of the work in isolation. In the why category, simplifying is key, so teachers don't feel like another thing is being added to their plates. I know that is what it feels like, but when we are, when the purpose is truly clarified and there is a true collaborative effort, teachers don't feel like, here we go again, something else for me to do. And then in the area of wholeness, the teacher well-being is protected, and small wins are celebrated, and the work is paced. So it's not just everything so much at one time. It's kind of chunked. All right, I'm going to continue with addressing how coaching can benefit or can address teacher resistance, as well as some facilitator talking points. So again, coaching should be done alongside teachers. It is not punitive. It is not evaluative. So when we think about wariness, peer coaching can be very beneficial. Having those professional learning communities where PD is provided and teachers actually have a chance to reflect on the PD to see how it's beneficial, or reflecting on a strategy maybe that they implemented. And then teacher success stories. Teacher success stories are important, where teachers can actually see and hear about the successes of their peers, so they can actually kind of see like, hey, this is what so-and-so is doing in their classroom. This is working, to help them actually see that these things are actually doable. Some facilitator talking points could be, here's why the shifts in our ELA standards matter. They help students access texts independently and deeply. Another way to frame that could be, we're in this together. None of us are expected to do it perfectly right away. In the area of willfulness and coaching, co-planning, where the planning is intentional and based on the need of the students as well as the teachers. It's also a great idea to share peer exemplars. That could be lesson plans or maybe even recording a phenomenal lesson of a colleague. I know many times teachers kind of wish they could get into the walls of their colleagues. When we have team meetings, we kind of share things that we're doing, but it's truly beneficial to kind of see your colleagues and peers in action. So that'll be a great way for teachers to actually see and witness some of the successes that their peers are having within their classrooms. Some facilitator talking points could be, I understand where you're coming from. Let's see how your perspective aligns to our new goals. Another one could be, we want to build on what works for students, and evidence shows this approach helps them to grow. So yes, you are feeling heard, your ideas and feelings and views are validated, and hear how that aligns to the new work. Last but not least, the area of weariness, small step action plans, celebrating progress along the way. It's also a good idea for coaches to provide quick and immediate feedback. And then some facilitated talking points could be, let's take this one step at a time. We don't need to perfect everything at once. That could also be phrased as, we'll celebrate progress along the way because every step forward counts.
Okay, so if we were conducting this professional development, every good professional development has a breakout session activity. So what I would do is, since it would be such a large professional development, I would have teachers group based on grade level specific within the ELA standards. And then I would begin by giving each teacher like a sticky note with the numbers 1 through 4 on each. Teachers would then have to group up according to their numbers, no more than 4 teachers to a group. Each group will then select one of the newly adopted Georgia ELA standards, chart paper, and markers. And the purpose would be for them to compare the new ELA standards to the old ones. They would be required to identify key instructional shifts, brainstorm ways to have teacher support, and then they would share their group reflections, which would also be based on their grade levels. So, as I mentioned, both the new and the old versions of the standards, so teachers could look at them side by side, would be provided. And then each group would have about 30 minutes to dissect the new standards and compare them with the old. And then the teachers would list them out on their chart paper. So they would have like a column for the old standards and then a column for the new standards, and then comparing the two. The activity would ask teachers to compare the old and new standards. What stayed the same? What are things that changed? What's new? And this step would help teachers to see exactly where instructional shifts will need to happen, instead of feeling like it's all new. Next, groups would identify the biggest instructional shifts they noticed, maybe higher text complexity, more writing across genres, maybe there's an increased emphasis on speaking and listening, or any gaps that they noticed between the old standards and the new standards. This is going to help identify where resistance might come up, because those shifts can often create the most anxiety. And I think if teachers kind of have an idea of what they're about to get into, it kind of helps relieve some of that anxiety, maybe frustration, maybe weariness of the unknown of what to expect. And then I would ask groups to brainstorm what kinds of professional learning or resources they think they would need that would help them to make those shifts successfully. For example, if teachers feel unprepared for writing instruction, maybe they need like a targeted workshop or model lessons that could be a helpful support to them. And then finally, once the teachers have had an opportunity to really go through the new standards, dissect them, look at them in comparison to the old standards, each group would then share the information they collected on their charts. And this way, they're digging into the new standards, and it's a community effort. It's not just all the work put on a couple of teachers. And again, it would be based on grade level. So they feel like it's directed towards them, and it's being very helpful towards them. So the goal of this sharing is not only to build a collective understanding, but it's to normalize that resistance happens, and it can be addressed with the right and proper support. And then as a reflection and to wrap up the group activity, resistance is normal in times of change. Teachers are better prepared to adapt when shifts are well defined, and professional learning should target areas of greatest need. So again, I would end the activity by reminding teachers that resistance is normal, and it's a natural response to change. I think Jermaine had kind of mentioned that earlier, is like, we don't like being out of our comfort zones. We like when we get into a normal routine of things, but I often feel like I grow the most, especially as an educator, when I am forced to get out of my comfort zone. And teachers adapt best when they clearly see what's changing and why. It really just kind of helps them to smooth into that transition of change. So the role of this professional development is to identify those key shifts and provide support where it's needed most, like for future professional developments for those teachers and what they're going to need based on the new standards.
All right, and then going into the wrapping up and the closure aspect of that, definitely have to evaluate. And there's several different methods as far as evaluating anytime we have new standards or new developments in education. Exit tickets, at the end of each professional learning session, teacher will complete a short reflection to capture immediate takeaways and identify any needs that they might have. For example, one prompt could be, what's one strategy from today that you plan to implement in your classroom? And then it's open-ended, so a teacher would fill that out. Another prompt would be, what's one question or challenge you're still thinking about? So what's based on the new information, what do you find that might be the most challenging for you when you go back into your classroom? And also that's open-ended question as well. Lastly, with the exit ticket, another prompt will be, how do you see this strategy making a difference in your students' engagement or student learning? The next will be survey questions. Basically with this, teachers complete a short survey after having time to try the strategies in their classroom. So basically you would just give each teacher, different questions and have them fill it out. It could be anonymous if you want to go that route, but basically, how confident do you feel about the strategy that we implemented? Do you strongly agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree, and just to gauge, the teachers and how they feel like things are going. Lastly, we would definitely have follow-up professional development discussions. So basically, when we come back and meet again, we will revisit the strategies that were introduced. We will share evidence and the impact to see what kind of impact it had on the students. And in that regard, you want the teachers to bring samples of student work before and after using the new strategies. We want to have collaborative problem solving, meaning teachers are going to share their success stories that we mentioned earlier, or their not so successful stories. That way we can kind of collaborate to work together to make the best of the new strategy. And then last but not least, reflection. Self-reflection is always good. I feel like in anything, not only education, but also in life. So definitely we want to reflect and see how we're improving both with the teaching as well as with student achievement. All right, and then lastly, in closing here, our overall purpose of our today's session is to support the successful implementation of Georgia's new ELA standards. We want to strengthen teacher growth as a pathway to improve student achievement. And lastly, we want to reframe resistance as an opportunity for collaboration, trust, and collective growth, both amongst teachers and students. Thank you.